Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are bringing you this episode from the Rural Summit at Southern Utah University, 30th annual. And every year we've managed to come down here in the time we've been doing County Seat and find some very interesting topics. We have been putting a lot of attention this summer into the rural opportunity, the governor's challenge to find 25,000 new jobs in the 25 off-Wasatch Front counties, and we are continuing that series. And one of the presenters here is our guest on the show, Natalie Gochnour, who is the director of the Kem Gardern Policy Institute, University of Utah, and she joins us. She made a great presentation today, and I love the analogy of the Marshall Plan for Utah. What triggered you to make that connection when you were thinking about what needed to happen?
You know, the Marshall Plan has a very storied and successful history, as I think most of the viewers will know. Marshall Plan after World War II, George Marshall was a very successful general. Truman taps him to be the Secretary of State. And he's really charged with the responsibility of rebuilding Western and Central Europe because it was in the United States' interest for that to happen. And he marshaled, if I do a pun of words, the energy, the money, the time, the leadership to invest a lot of money over a 4-year period to help those war-torn economies. So in public policy, you'll often hear, oh, we need a Marshall Plan for the United States now, or we need a Marshall Plan for this, that, and the other. So one time in my office, a group of us were talking, and we said, you know, when you look at the data, there are parts of Utah that are not sharing in this broad prosperity. We need a Marshall Plan for them. And so one thing led to another, and I was asked to come down here and explain what a Marshall Plan might look like.
You just mentioned 4 very key elements, obviously, to try and make something work. And you've got leadership, and you've got, particularly money involved in, along with some of the investment. And so with all of the talk that's going on and all of the planning, I would like to maybe just have you take that comparison and break it down and saying, how does a European Marshall Plan apply to rural Utah? Obviously, it's not war-torn, but it might feel like it to some people who live in Junction, for example.
You know, I think a Marshall Plan is not a perfect metaphor. You know, Western and Central Europe were decimated. That's not the case in almost every place I'm thinking about in our great state. But it is a great metaphor when it comes to a few things. The Marshall Plan was big and bold. It was very well led. It was focused on investment or putting money into projects that build and grow an economy. And it was very narrow in its time frame. It was only a 4-year endeavor. And so essentially we passed this act in the US Congress that spent money in Western and Central Europe to rebuild dams, infrastructure, manufacturing facilities, and give them a jump start.
Well, why is that timing so important? I mean, I kind of get this sense that this entire project, there are those across rural Utah that feel it's going to get lost in a slogan and not really get anywhere because it will get lost in the planning section and nobody will ever agree on anything. Is that short time window critical to making this a success, to make sure that something happens?
I think it's wise for 2 reasons. One is it really focuses your energy. So you basically are saying, let's roll up our sleeves and go find the most disadvantaged areas in terms of their economy, and let's pump them up. Let's serve them. Let's sacrifice for them. So that's one reason, is it creates this intensity and this urgency that you can't sustain over 20, 30, 40 years. The other reason I think it's important is I'm a big believer in markets. And once you do that investment, maybe some of that initial priming of the pump, if you will, I think markets can take over and do great things.
I can hear the arguments right off the bat. You're picking winners and losers if you hone in on a couple of projects. How do you answer that criticism?
Yeah, well, here's what's happening. We have, I'm going to say, 11 counties in this state that have contracted since before the Great Recession. So 2007, you know, economies are doing well. We were at a certain level. Then we had the Great Recession. All things, you know, it was really awful. And then now we've been in the second longest expansion in our state's history. We have 11 counties that have declined since before the Great Recession. So in that case, I don't think this is about picking winners and losers. There are losers out there right now. There are counties struggling. that haven't been part of this expansion. And I think we are a prosperous enough state to invest in these communities and give them more opportunity. So I don't think it's about picking winners. I think it's about serving some communities that have been left behind.
Okay, it's a great place to take a break. I'm going to ask you about that when we come back. You're watching The County Seat. We're talking with Natalie Gochnour here, and we'll be right back. Natalie Gochnour. I'm sorry, folks.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
It's one more, here we go again. I tell myself I'm not enough, but one more time is not enough. One last kiss and then you were gone, and I'm here wishing you could stay a little longer. Stay a little longer. Wishing you could stay a little longer.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to The County Seat. We are talking today about 25,000 jobs in 25 counties, and we're kind of trying to hone in on maybe how you make that plan a success and make it happen quickly so that people can see the fruits of your labor. Natalie Gochnour is our guest today, and I want to kind of continue where we were and just ask the question of how do you get this started? Because you could get lost in the planning and nothing would ever happen. And that's what a lot of people are worried about.
Yeah, and and I'm a big believer in planning, so I have to really kind of, wrestle with this a little bit. I will say that I believe Governor Herbert and Lieutenant Governor Cox are very well positioned in how they think about these things. So when Governor Herbert was a county commissioner in Utah County, he worked a lot with rural counties. Obviously, Lieutenant Governor Cox comes from rural Utah, still lives in rural Utah. So I think we've got people who are committed to rural Utah and know how to do something that can be very positive. But the challenge is you have to do a reset here, right? Because I would argue that we've been putting all this effort into rural Utah. We talk about it a lot, and we have had a prosperous economy now for 8 years in the state, leading among states, and yet we still have, in my estimation, 10 to 11 counties that really are not keeping pace. So you have to do a lot of things. I think the governor needs to have a leader on this. That's probably Val Hale, who directs Economic Development Forum, but there's others that could be. But you need a designated leader. You need an advisory board that helps that leader make great decisions. I think the Governor's Rural Partnership Board is ideal for that. You also need a technical team that surrounds that group and gives them the data they need to make smart investment decisions. Now, you asked about planning, and I mostly just designed a process. You can't spend money without great information, and that's another way of thinking of planning. I just think you need to really focus it, expedite it, shorten the time frame, draw from the plans, the multitude of plans that are out there, and then just let the best ideas compete.
It seems to me that for this to succeed, it can't be a mindset of Salt Lake City saying that these are the kind of things we need to consider in the plan, because quite often stuff that looks really good on paper and would really function on the Wasatch Front falls flat on its face when you get into a community of 800 people and huge success for you. I mean, look at Daggett County. 1,000 jobs in Daggett County would drown them, but 50 would just be marvelous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you're thinking in terms of success in quantitative numbers that mean something in a city planning, they don't in local planning. Doesn't that leadership really need to have a component of local understanding to it?
Yeah, I think that's an imperative, and I completely agree with you there. In other words, there used to be this saying, once you've seen one rural community, you've seen one rural community.
Yeah.
You know, and so people that don't live in that community aren't going to know their needs. And so I would suggest something really simple. It would be, where are the areas of greatest need? And it doesn't have to be a county, it could be a community, a city, but something that gives us what are the areas of greatest need. And then I would go engage with those communities, and I'd look at overarching trends, whether it's the growth of the tech sector in our state, or outdoor recreation and what it's doing, or some opportunity for agriculture and potentially an inland port. But I would try to find those ideas in those most disadvantaged communities that tie into a larger megatrend that could produce value and bring in money to that community.
So you're bringing money into a community. Where does that seed money come from? Where does that startup come from?
Oh,
Is
that's
that
a
is it a
great
sales
question.
pitch, or is that a state program?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we have just incredible needs on our both state and local government budgets. So it's hard to contemplate where does a Marshall Plan of investment come from for that. But I would suggest that there's just a lot of money that goes to a lot of things in this state, and in many ways it might just be redirecting existing monies. And also to do some help in Daggett County, as you mentioned, because of the scale. It doesn't need a lot of money. You got a really prosperous urban economic engine. A small fraction of that could do really great things in Daggett County. So I think it's really about people coming together and saying, this is a statewide priority. We want to do this, and we're going to redirect existing monies, and we might even free up some new monies, as long as we know we're spending them well.
So you're saying you got to get Box Elder County on board to bail out Daggett County to start the ball rolling.
I'm okay with that, because I do think we're all in this together. And I would say, mineral lease royalties. I would say, revenue from the motor fuel tax. I would say sales income property taxes. I mean, these are the funds that are out there. The severance tax. I mean, we have sources of funds that can help in a major initiative like this.
All right. I have my next question lined up for you. We've got to take another break. We'll be right back on the County Seat.
Look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
ATV? Check. Four-wheel driving? Check. Bouldering? Check. Mountain biking? Check. Hiking? Check. River rafting? Check. Adventure is about more than just crossing activities off of a list, but hey, if you can find a place that gives you everything you're looking for, all the better. In Emery County, you'll find the San Rafael swell, trails, lakes, and the small-town hospitality you're looking for. San Rafael Country, in the heart of Utah. Visit us and check something off your list.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the Marshall Plan for Utah and how to get the rural part of the state in on the prosperity that we've enjoyed here for the last decade or so. So, Natalie, I want to ask a question about resistance is a part of this plan, and I see that there are two areas of resistance. There may be some rural counties who you say, oh, let's change the face of your county and let's bring in something that helps you. And they don't want to change anything because they're afraid that their existing structure, their existing economy, let's say cattle ranching, is going to get pushed out by somebody else and that their traditional values will suffer. The other area of resistance I see is that people in the Wasatch Front, where most of the legislators are, where most of the decisions on money come from, are going to say, well, why should we invest in rural Utah?
Right.
I'm going to throw those two questions out for you and tell you where you go with that.
Make sure I get to both of them.
Okay.
Governor Herbert, in putting out this 25,000 job goal, I mean, he's kind of laid out the gauntlet. He's saying, I am the CEO of the state and I am all in. I'm committing my time and energy to helping rural Utah. And so now we're in the process of, well, how do we do that? And job creation doesn't just happen because you set a goal. The goal's really good, but it requires investment. It requires public-private interaction to say, hey, we're going to put a manufacturing plant there, or we're going to invest in a road there, and that will enable the market to do other great things and the like. And so I think that what's likely to happen is that as these plans develop to create the 25,000 jobs, and to the extent they use the Marshall Plan for inspiration, that communities will be asked to compete. We've got a limited amount of money to fund some projects that help rural Utah. Where are the best ones? And those counties that are very, let's call them tradition bound, who don't want to change, that's a choice, and that's a lifestyle choice, but it may not be the best economic choice. And so I think that rural leaders will be in a situation of saying, what do we want to be? Do we want to tie in and go where the economy's going, whether it's in tech, or let's say it's in something with broadband, let's say it's something with outdoor recreation. They're going to have to make some choices here.
But in reality, it seems to me that a traditional economy that's failing, that tradition is more threatened by it failing than it is by complementing it with in other words, it's not always, the governor says this all the time, it's not an either-or situation. Yeah. You can put new technology, new industries in, and protect the old ones if you do proper planning. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think that planning and investment are really key to these decisions. And if you are a rural county commissioner and you love your lifestyle and you love your traditions, and you are nervous about outside interests coming in, I think you just got to kind of sit back and think to yourself, can I have it both ways? Can I keep some of the things I like here and invite new economic opportunities into my county? And I think in most of the cases they'll find that they can.
Okay, so now let's go to the other part of the buy-in that we were talking about.
Yeah. Remind me the question?
Yeah, the question is, how do you get, if you got to have the whole state buy in, how do you get the guy in Weber County that says, I don't want my tax dollars going to Daggett County? Yeah. I don't mean to pick on Daggett County. You guys are great up there. We'll pick on Paiute now. How do I keep those dollars from going to Paiute County?
Well, one of the first things is it's already happening in a very big way. We share income tax in this state to fund the schools. We share gas taxes to fund the roads. Sales taxes of the general fund are spent all around the state. I mean, we're citizens, we're residents of this state. It's understood that we care about our brothers and sisters in the state. So I'm not as troubled by that. I think where I get more trouble is not that you're taking someone's money and going here, but just the competition of these projects. You know, what are the merits of this one versus that one? And I think that's a trickier conversation. But I do again think that that's why this is so important that you focus, because when you focus it, you're not taking peer economies. You're taking an economy that's thriving, an economy that's not, and you're saying we're gonna help that economy. And the good news is when you help an economy, it does grow the pie.
I wouldn't argue that at all. But people saying, well, we wanted a new city park here in Syracuse, and that money is now going to help a business come into a county that that I haven't even driven through in
Yeah.
10 years.
Well, let me tell you something else that Syracuse would want. Syracuse wants clean air. They want less congestion on the roads. You know, they want, some of them came from rural Utah. They want opportunities to go back to rural Utah. I think it's really true that there is a lot of interconnection. We have problems in urban Utah that rural Utah can help solve. Those problems tend to do with pollution and congestion and even the availability of labor. You know, we have a labor shortage on the Wasatch Front. We also have rising costs. It's very expensive in urban Utah right now, and increasingly so. So I'm a big believer that urban and rural have common interests if we can get the conversation going and apply the leadership.
How do you launch it? I mean, if you were to write a timeline and they were to adopt your thinking, and we were to set, let's see, it's 2017, 2019. We're going to be done with this project. What kind of deadlines would you set?
Well, the first thing I would do is exactly what the governor's doing, and that is that I would be unifying people behind a common goal, which he's done with the 25,000. I would be very focused on the 2018 general legislative session because there's urgency here. And if you know, the legislature's where a lot of this gets done, and it's a part-time legislature. They won't meet again for a year. I mean, they'll have interim. Sometimes they'll have a special session. But I would really marshal the energy to have some proposed process and projects in front of the legislature in 2018.
Is that going to come from the quote team leader that he identifies and the research programs, or is that going to have to be generated through the legislature, the local level up?
Yeah, I think the Governor's Rural Partnership Board is an ideal place for a lot of that to happen. The makeup of the board is quite strategic in terms of its mix and rural background. It has stature in the state. And you know, the governor is our leader here, and that's his partnership board.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back and we'll finish up with the county seat in just a minute.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
The Layton Hills Mall offers more than just shopping. Bring the whole family and enjoy SeaQuest Interactive Aquarium to feed the fish and exotic birds, hold live reptiles, and even swim with the stingrays. Or pump up the action and visit Dartside, Utah's premier soft foam dart tag arena. And don't forget the Great Room Escape, where you can challenge your friends to solving mysteries inside themed rooms. So come and experience great fun at the Layton Hills Mall and visit playindavis.com for other great activities.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are discussing today the Marshall Plan for Utah. I love the name. It makes me feel so patriotic.
Yeah.
You know, I would even,
it's a beautiful time in world history.
I would even clean my plate just to help all the kids in rural Utah.
Okay.
You know, like I used to do on his Marshall Plan. Okay, so I want to go back and just talk about, you know, we got a strategic plan. We've got a short period of time. We rally our forces, we target them, we have a success. We've helped 4 projects, say, and we got 11 counties that are suffering. So how do you create 2.0?
Yeah. Well, I think you go into the 2018 legislative session with some ideas queued up. you know, the legislative is a very deliberative body. They'll have opinions about this. They'll take away projects, they'll add projects, I don't know. But they have a track record of making great decisions. And at the end of that, you have to reassess. I'm a big believer in mid-course corrections. And so I think the challenge for people leading the 25,000 jobs effort is to be responsive to those needs. So I think you'd come right back in the 2019 general legislative session and you'd have your next set of projects to fund. The difference in what I'm talking about is we're not talking about plans. We are talking about projects.
And that's an important distinction.
For me, that's an important distinction because the Marshall Plan wasn't about going and figuring out, you know, post-World War international relations. It was about, no, we're going to go in and address these needs, and when we address it, we're all going to be better. And it helps with us.
We're going to put
on
refrigerators back in houses. In
tractors to, you know, families in agricultural France, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so you see this as kind of an ongoing process then. I mean, it's project-oriented, it's very specific, it's short, but you wouldn't say, okay, well, we're going to do this set of projects for 4 years and then we'll come back and we'll start another 4. Yeah, you'd start looking at them each year?
I would. I see this as a handful of projects, whatever we can afford and feel like we're willing to sacrifice for, that we put forward, that we know we can get the maximum return on investment and help our good state, and then finish it up and let the market do its work.
So people are always worried about state giving money that they never get back. Mm-hmm. Do the communities get this back if we do this right?
Yeah, tell me what you mean, like the state paying for something.
Yeah.
And
it becomes another, it just becomes another in perpetuity
I see.
Program. I mean, does the state see the economic growth across the whole state that makes up for this?
Yeah, I am not troubled by the state putting out, in the sense that, you know, communities are all subsets of the state. Mm-hmm. The state is certainly the entity that has the greatest resources and the ability to do a lot of important things. And so I think this is really a state taking care of its people.
Thank you so much for taking
Pleasure
the time
to be with you
today. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in each week on the County Seat. This is one of the better programs. Of course, all of our programs are good, but this was an important one, particularly for you people on the Wasatch Front to share with your country cousins and have a further dialogue about it, because this is a brave and bold move, and it's going to take a lot of concerted effort to convince the legislature to move forward. We've got a governor on board, we've got a lot of local leaders on board, but we need to make it happen, and you can be part of that dialogue. So we invite you to check it out. Go to our website. We'll have some more additional information. Share this with your friends, and we'll see you next week on the County Seat.